Good evening and welcome to the January 28th, 2020 Gilroy Central School District Board of Education meeting. Would you all please silence your cell phone and stand for the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We recently learned of the passing of a longtime employee. James Foley began his Gilroy Central School District career in 1959 as a teacher at Westmere Elementary School, where he later became assistant principal. He also worked as an assistant principal at Linwood Elementary School, as well as district coordinator for special education programs. Finally, Mr. Foley served 8 more years before retiring as assistant superintendent for business in 1992. Please join me in a moment of silence at this time. Thank you. Next, we have an announcement for a board vacancy. The board will discuss a process for filling a vacant board member seat. Next, we have public comment. Before I start public comment, just a reminder for all the speakers, you have about 3 to 5 minutes per speaker. Please state your name at the microphone so the people watching at home know who you are. And just a reminder that you cannot speak about a individual student or staff member. Thank you. So first we have Joanie Hendrix.
Board members, I appreciate your time and consideration. Many of you have reached out to me personally to follow up on the situation that I had addressed with you. I was really nervous coming here tonight. There's a lot of emotions going on in our home right now. But as I drove, I remembered you all are parents, you are teachers, and you have the same love and care for kids that I do. I'm not here anymore because I have a kid at stake. I've removed my children. I'm here because I care so much about the other kids in that classroom. Last year, I volunteered at least 3 days a week in my son's kindergarten classroom. I know the kids in their classes like the back of my hand. They're like my own. Their safety is paramount to me, and that is why I'm still here. I'm still advocating. I'm not an entitled mom. I did not pull my kids out because I thought that they were better than anybody else. We actually sought to be in public schools because I appreciate diversity, and I appreciate the opportunity to teach my kids empathy through kids and experiences that are different than their own. This particular situation, as you may know, came to a head when my child's first grade teacher was pushed into the table and hit right in front of him. Following months of his reports of situations where a student was hitting the teacher and causing a disruption, I knew that we had crossed the line from teaching my child empathy for his classmate to being concerned about the safety for him, his classmate, and his teacher. As was noted in my letter, we met with the principal and with Dr. Schnur, and we were told that there was similar behavior taking place in 2 of the other first grade classrooms, but without the additional professional backup, those teachers were having to handle it on their own, and we determined that that was not the best fit for my son either. When we left the meeting, we were told that there was no solution for us, that the best solution that we could possibly have was that he would be placed better next year. Both my husband and I, we saw 6 months sitting in front of us, and we knew that there was no way that we could let this little boy sit there. He many times would cry, and he was worried about the safety of his teacher and worried about her being hurt, and that was too much for us to endure. What was most disturbing about this whole situation for us is that at no time were we ever notified that the students had ever been lined up for an emergency evacuation, or as they call it, the emergency lineup, where they run as fast as they can to the library, and then they are supposed to begin doing the work that they were doing in the classroom. We were never told that there was a program being put in place. We were never given the resources to discuss with our children the behaviors they may see, or, better yet, how we can work with them when their emotions are affected by what they see. This is simply unacceptable. I can't tell you how many parents have contacted me when they found out that I withdrew my children, and they wanted to know exactly why. And I am not one to lie. I told them exactly what I told you in your letter. They were upset. We didn't have any communication. We are told when there's a power outage in the school, but we're not being told when our kids are being removed at least every other week because of the disruptive situation where they're witnessing their teacher actually be hurt. Removing my children was not a decision that came lightly. It involved tears, it involved heartache, it involved more sadness than I can relay. My teacher, my son legitimately loves his teacher. Miss Stone is probably just the biggest piece of gold that you all have in this district, and I cannot say enough about her. It was the hardest decision that we ever made. But we had to make the decision that we have to put our kids' safety it's a priority. I want to see this program succeed in the way it was envisioned. I want it to have proper support, plans and protocol in place to ensure safety, and I want the parents to be included in how these programs will impact their children. Dr. Singleton told me last week that he sat in the classroom for a day and did not witness any unusual behavior. As I relayed to Dr. Wiles, a one day in a class is not an indicator of its functioning as it should. It is the same as we tell parents when the test scores come out. This test score is just a slice of life. It is how that child is performing that day at that time. In order to get a full read, you would have to sit in the classroom for 2 weeks, at least, in order to get a proper barometer and gauge the climate. I understand the classrooms evacuations are becoming a national trend, but again, I want to encourage the district to promote communication because parents have a right to be informed when their child is removed from a classroom. I also want to publicly say that at no point in my letter nor my conversations with the board members who called to reach out did I suggest that the principal's time away from the building was a contributor to this problem. I want her to continue to strive towards health. I would love to see her lead this program into its full potential. In my experience, Mrs. Rizzo has been a caring and
Mrs.
thoughtful...
Hendrix, I'm sorry I have to interrupt. You can't talk about individual staff or students.
Okay.
And time's almost up. It's 5 minutes.
In closing, I want to say my desires for this program are not unlike any of the goals each of you has for a district as a whole. I want to see the children safe. I want them to be able to strive towards success, and I want the teachers to be equipped to be able to help them achieve those goals. Finally, I want the parents to be communicated with at all times so that they know how to best support their children from home. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jessica Samaras. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jessica Samaras. I'm also a parent of a child in the classroom in question. My family moved here from Massachusetts the day before school started in Linwood. I learned 2 months prior that my son, who was too young in Massachusetts, was now going to start kindergarten. His first day of kindergarten, breakfast was served in the lobby of the Courtyard Marriott next to the Crossgates Mall. Very prestigious and luxurious. To say that our first few weeks at Linwood were an adjustment for my family would be kind of an understatement. However hectic and confusing all the things in our lives were for those first few weeks, my son's kindergarten teacher and her classroom, the impact they had on my son were magic. He would lament to me and say that he wished every day was a school day instead of Saturdays and Sundays being for family. That felt good. I found myself crying like a crazy lady at his first parent-teacher conference. See, he had struggled in Massachusetts in pre-K. I was told he had issues to go with his issues. But when he started kindergarten, his teacher starts telling me how great he's doing, how he's thriving, how he is at the right place now. I cried very real, very sloppy, relieved mom's tears, which I utterly failed at hiding, because finally what I was hearing from my school matched what I knew my son to be. Kindergarten came and went in a blink. My son was reading and writing-ish and adapting to all the elementary school things of life. We thanked our lucky stars that we randomly chose Guilderland, New York as our new home, our fourth home in 5 years. The summer after kindergarten, I started to hear rumors among the mom circuit that one first grade class would be a pilot class, an immersion program for children who struggled in different ways. I have to say the feedback and anxiety I heard from many of my mom peers made me rethink my opinion of more than a few of them. See, my nephew's autistic. My family has seen firsthand the benefits of these sorts of programs. He went from nonverbal, the best you would get was a grin, at the worst of times it was a sob and a shriek, wailing, flailing. But now he's talking, he's learning to do math, he's learning to recognize sight words, he is improving. But this is because his family and his school work together, and his world is so much brighter for that collaboration. Summer ends, school begins, and now I know my son is in the class. But because I think my kid hung the moon, I assume this is because he's exceptionally kind and open, and because he has to this point proven to be an eager and quick learner. However, this is all an assumption at this point. I still have not heard a word from anyone at the school regarding any kind of pilot program and whether or not my child is in it. As the school year progresses, I start to hear very concerning news coming from my son's class. Room clears, violent outbursts, desks, chairs being thrown, teachers being hit and bitten by a student. I find myself having to fill in a lot of blanks with my best guess, the experiences of others, and my own imagination. Optimistic outlooks are rarely the result of such a setting. Yet I still hear nothing from the school. No, today there was a room clear in your child's room. Here are some talking points for you to discuss at home if you feel necessary. Or please, feel free to contact the principal, the teacher, school psychologist with any concerns you might have. Nothing. And then last week, my son's best friend mother calls me. She is withdrawing her 2 children from Linwood due to the goings-on in our children's classroom. And we still hear nothing from the administration. I was really hoping I wouldn't have to get up here tonight. I really hoped someone would reach out to us and kind of just say, here's the situation. I have questions I fear will be swatted away by the principal, questions I think I am more than reasonable in asking, questions like why is this program in place without any communication to any of the parents? We have school-wide meetings to discuss what new math is going to look like, but nothing about this. I would like to know what model this is based on. Can you give me some stats on previous program successes? How did everyone in that room fare? Were there violent outbursts? How frequently was the room cleared? Is it wise to begin such an undertaking, however noble the goal and intentions, when your special ed teacher is on leave, when your principal is dealing with her own very difficult battles out of school, when the school psychologist is only part-time? What metrics are used to determine if this is working? Who is the judge of this? Is this the case of those invested in the program succeeding, acting as the sole judge and jury? How many times has my child's room been cleared? Why were we never informed of this? If there is a shelter-in-place issued, we are notified by text, email, phone calls, everything short of messenger pigeons. And yet, I've heard nothing about how many times my child's room has been cleared. How are you ensuring my child is safe? How are you ensuring he's not losing ground academically? That the disruptions are not having a negative impact on him emotionally? We're struggling right now with getting him to distance himself from children who are mean to him. He's not recognizing ill intent, and so he's having to be taken out of class to work on this.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Ms. Samaras. It's at 5 minutes, so
That's
we
fine.
can wrap it up soon.
The thumbs up, thumbs down current technique of checking in with the kids whether they're okay or not is not acceptable. Something needs to be done. I would like to know what's going on, and I would just like to know my kid's safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kym Blazusiak.
Hi, Kym Blazusiak, parent. I'm talking about the playgrounds tonight, and I had to write it down because I tend to be scattered on this topic. I would like to ask the board to consider adding funds to the 2020-2021 school year budget to provide playground equipment for all 5 of our elementary schools. Almost half of the district students are at the elementary level, and our playgrounds are a critical part of our recess activities for children. Research shows that students benefit academically, socially, and physically through recess. They're able to focus more during their day by burning off excess energy and taking a pause from their learning. They're able to socialize freely on the playground without the distractions that come from electronic devices. They learn to cooperate and communicate with others while playing not only with children in their own class, but children from other classes and grades. They also benefit from running, jumping, climbing, and crawling through the playground. These activities are great for refining their reflexes, motor skills, and flexibility. Recess also benefits their mental health. Our students are dealing with more depression, anxiety, and stress than ever before. They need to be able to have free play to help regulate their emotions and just be kids. At Pine Bush, our current structure is 25 years old. It has been falling apart, and we can no longer find parts to replace the damaged pieces. It is also not handicap accessible, making it difficult for all students to play together. The playgrounds are used throughout the year by community members, maybe more than our students. During the summer months, the playground at Pine Bush is packed with students of all ages and families spending time together. And if anyone has ever seen it, because I live behind the school, it's pretty amazing because you have parents in chairs talking to each other, people playing basketball, kids. It's a definite community feel. Right now, our PTAs are working very hard to come up with creative ways to raise the funds needed. Unfortunately, this is not an easy task. There's only so much our parents can do, and we're all competing against ourselves and booster clubs for corporate and business sponsorships. We need the district to help us give our students and community playground equipment that everyone can use and enjoy. And I also wanted to mention that in the first part of the capital project that was voted down last year, we did have playgrounds in that part. It was not a wish list. It was something that was badly needed and is still badly needed. I also had 2 sickies home today, so I asked them what they thought of the playground. And my kindergartner just said, it keeps breaking and stuff. People get stinged there sometimes, and we need bee spray. My fourth grader said, I keep getting splinters and stung. And she does, like in the head, every time. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kim Matthews.
Hi, I'm Kym Matthews. I'm a Linwood parent. I'm just going to read what I have here. I'm the mother of 3 children. One of my children has autism. He started off his educational experience at Linwood. However, as the years progressed, it was determined that my child needed to be moved out to an out-of-district placement. This decision was not taken lightly and required careful consideration. Teachers, TAs, the school psychologists, and even outside professionals helped make this determination. There was one subset of people who were not consulted when we were tasked with making this decision, and that group of people were the parents of my child's peers. My child's flapping hands may have been distracting to others, his vocal stims probably made the other children look up from their work, and if he had a meltdown, I'm sure it could be heard by many. Disabilities come in all shapes and sizes and affect everyone differently. I was lucky to have the support of the Linwood administration while making the tough choice to move my child to another setting. I was fortunate that she didn't consider kicking him out of school if he had a mental break. I was lucky that the administration understood that if he squeezed his TA's hand or arm too tight, it was because his anxiety was causing him distress, not that he was meaning to hurt anyone. We are fortunate that our administration, along with others, helped us implement many interventions and accommodations before an out-of-district placement was made. I was grateful that this was all done while maintaining the confidentiality of my child and family. Each time he had a hard time at school, other parents were not alerted. He wasn't singled out for the behavior that he exhibited due to his disability. But where I had the most good fortune was outside of school, where my child was and still is invited to birthday parties. My child and I are still greeted with warm hellos when we are seen outside of school. In a world that we're so divided, it's important that we teach friendly interactions and acceptance to our children by modeling these behaviors ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Last, we have Mark Jones.
Good evening. I'm Mark Jones. I'm a 1981 graduate of Guilderland High School, and tonight I'm here on behalf of Coach Penna and the Guilderland football program as an advocate to continue a topic that I think has already been brought forward to the board, which is the idea of looking into and moving forward with trying to update the football field, the athletic field, with a synthetic turf field. I've already had conversations with Corrosion, who has really moved this forward on behalf, I believe, of the lacrosse program, girls field hockey, even boys soccer. And tonight, after I got a text from Coach Penny yesterday, we're here to have the football part of it be thrown into the hopper, so to speak, and we are going to work with Corey and the others involved in moving this project forward in terms of putting together a plan, both from a financial standpoint and a public relations standpoint, in terms of how can we move this forward and make it feasible, both financially and to the town wide in general, and look at the different ways in terms of how this can be funded and how it would benefit Guilderland athletics, not the football program, but Guilderland athletics, all the way down to, it's my understanding, the physical education and the kids in the high school that could be able to utilize and use the field as we move forward. I'm not going to get into a lot of the details because it looks like after I saw the proposal tonight that Corey Jasinski and some of the other folks have already done their due diligence and a lot of homework. But we're here tonight, Coach Penn and I, to add our support as we begin to move this whole venture forward, hopefully to a good conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We don't have a student rep, right? No. Okay. Next on the agenda is budget development. Neil?
We're actually going to start with Danielle Poirier tonight with the bus replacement plan.
Good evening. Good evening. Sorry. Do that. I'm Danielle Poirier. I'm the transportation supervisor here in Gilliland, and I'm here again. I feel like I was just here, but I'm here again for the bus replacement plan for the school year of 2020, 2021. Our current fleet consists of 73 large 66-passenger buses, 16 30-passenger buses, 9 18/1 wheelchair. That means those 9 buses are equipped with a wheelchair lift. So we can configure them in many different ways, but the basic way is 18 and 1. 3 minivans, 2 large 24 and 3 wheelchair buses. Again, it's a large bus equipped with a wheelchair lift. Can be configured in many different ways. We can take seats out, but basically it's a 24 and 3. And 2 Suburbans for a total of 105 school buses. Our routing scheme this year, we service 4,856 students. We have 62 in-house bus routes, 14 outsourced bus routes. 56 of what we do here in Gilliland are in-district routes, 6 are out-of-district routes with a combination of perhaps some daycares sprinkled in there. We service 18 daycares a day, 13 student work programs, numerous athletic trips, an average of 9 middle school mental health clinic trips weekly, and several McKinney-Vento / foster student transportation runs. And for those of you that don't know, McKinney-Vento is a program for students that have been displaced for one reason or another, whether they've had a fire in their home or they've had an eviction. If they are placed outside of the district, we are responsible to go get them and bring them to school every day with up to 50 miles. So we have to do that every day. We're busy. Our fleet concerns are pretty typical every year. Currently, we have 2 buses that are 11 years old and 6 that are 10 years old. We're trying to accomplish, and we're almost there, having a 10-year replacement plan. So no bus, we would like no bus to be older than 10 years. The average mileage of the buses that are 10 years or older is 113,000 miles. And although those buses meet the DOT inspection requirements at this time, as time goes on, with the corrosion that we experience here in New York, with the salt that's put on the road, we have structural integrity issues because the buses are compromised due to corrosion. Costs associated with the aging fleet are exhaust systems. They can run anywhere between $2,000 to $5,000 depending on the model and the year of the bus. Fuel tanks, average of $900 just for the tank. That doesn't include labor to replace those, and they do rot out. They're under the bus. They experience a tremendous amount of corrosion. Radiators, $1,200, and body corrosion, if we have to send body work out, can run anywhere between $2,000 and $5,000, and that's very conservative. Body work is expensive. And the average we will get for one of our older buses when we surplus them out is they're worth about $1,500. So we prefer not to put a lot of money into the older buses. Sorry. We still experience a tremendous amount of corrosion, even though we apply a rust protection. It's applied annually. When we purchase the bus, we pay for it. It's applied annually for 10 years. They come every summer and undercoat our buses. We have a drive-through bus wash with undercarriage rinse twice a year. We steam clean the underneath of the buses prior to our DOT inspections. And every summer, we wash the outsides of the buses and we apply hand wax. And we still can't keep ahead of the corrosion. This is some photos that I took just last week of the corrosion. These are buses that are currently in service. 269 there, you can see the big rust spot. If you look at the red and yellow light on that bus up there on the right-hand top corner, you can see the streaks. That's rust running down. Behind those lights, we experience a tremendous amount of corrosion. corrosion under the windows, corrosion right there, and on the interior. That's in the step well going up into the bus, the corrosion that we experience. And all school buses in New York are inspected twice a year. If you have any corrosion, there comes a point with the corrosion that we have to fix it. And you can't bondo a school bus. You either have to replace a panel or you have to cut it out and weld it in. It's a lot of work and it's very costly to do that repair. The advantage of our new buses, we will be in our third cycle of ordering large buses with gasoline engines. The advantage to the gasoline engine, there are no fuel filters, no diesel particulate fluid that we have to burn, 14 fewer quarts of oil per oil change, no expensive exhaust systems, no exhaust system maintenance. The latest technology we get with the new buses is traction control, ProFlex, stepwell coating, and we are purchasing Scion 6-camera systems. This is a photo, or this is from one of our buses. These are the cameras. The first camera is above the driver looking to the back of the bus. The second camera is above the driver looking down into the stepwell. The third camera is the middle of the bus. The fourth camera is at the back of the bus looking forward. The fifth camera is in the bulkhead looking out, which is very useful. And the sixth camera is a rear-facing camera that we can use if we have a person that may have run our red lights. It's not perfect, but a lot of times we can capture their license plate number with that camera. This is, in fact, from one of our school buses. As that gray car there passed through our red lights, we were able to capture that picture. There's a button on the dashboard that the driver can push to flag an event, whether it's in the bus or outside of the bus. So it makes it easier for us to find it when we pull the hard drive and bring it into the computer. So the camera systems are phenomenal. It's almost a full-time job now looking at camera footage in our garage. So those are very useful. This is our 12-year purchase history. I came in 2012, late 2012. Since I've been here, we've been pretty consistent with our purchases, and that's why we're finally able to accomplish the 10-year replacement plan. And hopefully we will continue down this road. So this is what we're requesting for next year. 4 66-passenger buses, those are just the large, basic, run-of-the-mill bus. 3 66-passenger with chains. Chains mean they're an add-on to the bus. They're on-spot chains that there's a button on the dash that if we have inclement weather and we need better traction, you press the button, the chains lower down, and they spin under the rear tires of the bus to provide extra traction. We use those buses primarily up in the Bern area, Altamont, where there's a lot of hills. And we'd like to include another large bus with a wheelchair lift into the fleet. Gloria, you asked a question of me the other day about, is it all advantages to the new buses? Yeah. And I instantly said yes.
Right.
And you kind of called me out on that, and I did go back and I talked to Mitch, and he instantly said yes. Any mechanical thing, there's bound to be some problems here and there, but we definitely really love the gas buses. We don't have to plug them in the winter. They warm up quickly. They're just wonderful. And with the latest diesels, you have to have these diesel particulate filters and fluid, and it's very costly, and there's a lot of issues with them. So the gas has eliminated all those issues. We love them. So I did ask the question.
Thank you for the answer.
Yes. Any questions?
I have a question, Danielle. What happens with the license plate info? I know that's not really the the budget piece, but I'm just.
You had to, that's a loaded question. The state did pass a law that people can be prosecuted if we capture that image. However, it's super complicated, and there has to be, there's many entities are involved. Obviously the district, obviously the town police, obviously the state police, the trooper. If our driver presses that button, we, as supervisors in the transportation department, are not allowed to view that footage. We would have to call the police of the jurisdiction and have them come and retrieve the hard drive, which means now they're taking our hard drive, and then they have to sift through all this. So not only is it cumbersome for us, I'm certain that the Guilderland Police Department and the state police don't have somebody, sitting around that wants to go around to school districts and look at video. So the law has been passed. It's super complicated.
Thank you. Kelly, did you have a question? The 10-year, you said the 10-year-old goal, that's the max number of years that you'd like to keep a bus. Is that for all the type of buses, not just the 66-passenger bus?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. There's no small buses in this proposal. Because we're relying on contractors so much, we just decided that our small bus fleet is good for this year. We don't need any. Yes.
Thank you. Other questions?
How have we done with consolidating routes? I remember you mentioned something at business practices, the number of routes that we're doing or are we doing?
Well, as far as we're concerned, we've consolidated all that we can. Our buses are full. Most schools, whether it be Guilderland schools or out-of-district schools, start and end at the same time. So we're limited on how much we can do with a single bus and a single driver. We're hoping maybe with the bell time study, they might be able to point some things out that we can use for efficiencies, but we're not certain of that. We think we've done all that we can do. I'd love to free up some drivers. If I could consolidate a couple routes, that would be wonderful.
Maybe you could put a plug in for people who might be interested in becoming a driver.
You love a driver?
We do have a TV audience as well.
Other questions? Thank you, Danielle.
Very welcome. Thank you.
Next, state aid and tax cap presentation, Mr. Sanders.
Good evening. The topic this evening is going to be state aid, and this will be in relation to the state executive budget proposal and the tax levy limit calculation. So again, this is one of our vignettes as we continue through our budget process, working toward budget adoption in April and then to a budget vote in May. First, I'd like to share an overview of what we learned from the governor in terms of his executive budget release that happened on January 21st. Overall, he is proposing a $454 million increase in foundation aid. That's the basic aid that's intended to follow every child in New York State. Part of that, within that foundation aid category, is $50 million that he set aside for what are called community schools. This is an initiative that's been underway for several years, carving out a little bit of that foundation aid each year. It's usually been $50 million to set up resources in communities, not only to make other services available in school communities, such as healthcare and things like that, parental assistance and so on. Also, he identified $200 million, again, in that foundation aid category that's going to be targeted toward high needs district. So district that needs additional resources. This is the first time it's been segregated out in that fashion, apportioned differently to high needs school districts. Another category is expense-based aids, and that's $72 million under this proposal. And then there's a series of other smaller initiatives that the governor has typically included. Expanded pre-K for 3 and 4-year-olds. He's funded that in the past. Empire State After School Program, another thing that he's funded in the past, as well as early college high schools, and master's teachers programs. He's got 2 new items that he's proposing to fund with this budget. One is a statewide curriculum on diversity and tolerance that he would like to implement, and then a STEM entrepreneurship program. He's got $1 million set aside for both of those. And then finally, not identified specifically, but a category of other educational initiatives funded at $16 million. So overall, his proposal for education aid is $826 million. That represents a 3% increase. When you actually look at foundation aid and the money that will flow to schools directly, it's about 2.1% increase over the previous year. So in the executive budget proposal summary, the words behind the numbers, there's definitely an attempt to steer more funding to a high needs district, as we noted in the allocation of funds. Also an effort to consolidate or slow down the growth of certain reimbursements to schools, and also a continuation to invest in pre-K and after-school programs. So those are some of the budget priorities from the governor. Also, according to the governor, 85% of the foundation increase would go toward high needs districts. So what we're looking at now is a pool that was intended to provide educational resources behind every student, and now the governor's looking at it more as a pot of money in equity in the distribution. So he's steering more money toward high needs district out of that same pot, leaving less for more wealthy districts such as Guilderland. Also, his proposal is to consolidate 10 expense-based aid categories into that foundation aid category. That's been pure. Foundation aid definition has been pure up to this point in terms of just dollars following students to be successful, and now throwing in expense-based aids into that same pot of money. Also, he's proposing a cap on the growth of transportation aid reimbursement, and also another tier of reimbursement for school construction projects. There already is a tiering for school construction projects depending on when projects were approved, and there's been multiple iterations of that. Each time the aid ratio gets a little lower, and that will be the case in this situation as well. So any projects approved, capital projects approved after July 1st, 2020 would be subject to this lower tier of reimbursement for construction projects as proposed currently. Also under this proposal, we tried to ferret out exactly what the district is getting under a foundation aid increase. Now with the executive budget rolling in other aid categories, a lot harder to separate out, but there are a couple groups out there that we rely on to help us try to analyze that. It appears, if we were to look at pure foundation aid, that we are slated to receive under this proposal about a $78,000 increase in foundation aid. That's equal to 0.5% over the previous year. Last year when we started this process with foundation aid, we received a 0.25% increase under the executive budget proposal. We ended up with a 0.75 increase when the state budget was finally adopted. So I guess we're a little bit ahead of last year, but still very small. In terms of state aid and looking at our budget and what the executive budget reflects, our budgeted for state aid this year, $25,676,894. You can see the categories there of foundation aid, BOCES aid, so on and so forth. Next column shows what we're expecting to receive through the course of this school year. We're only halfway through, of course, so these aren't final numbers, but good expectations about where we will land. Looks like we're on target to land about $362,000 higher than our budget projection. Then the following year, how does that compare with this executive budget proposal? Looking at the numbers that we've been able to identify so far, it looks like compared to what we have in the budget in the current year, that first far left column, to what the governor is proposing for next year, it would be a reduction in aid of about $413,000 or 1.6%. So that looks like our starting point for budget development for next year based on what we currently have in the budget for revenue in terms of state aid and what we would include for next year based on the governor's proposal. It would be that reduction of $413,000. Now I'd like to switch over, talk a little bit about the tax levy limit or property tax cap. Just to remind everybody, it's an important part of our budget conversation in terms of voter approval for budget. Just to run through how it's formulated, it's an 8-step formula. Vast majority of expenses under the formula are limited to 2% or less based on the preceding calendar year CPI. And all of that formula really does is determine a threshold for voter approval. That's the total intent of that calculation. So if we propose a tax increase that's less than that threshold amount, we just need 50% of the voters to vote yes in order to have an approved budget. If we propose a budget that's greater than the threshold amount, we need a supermajority or 60% of the voters to vote yes to have a passed budget. And ultimately, if the budget's defeated, we cannot have any increase at all in the tax levy. So whatever amount of taxes we raised and collected in the current year, that remains for the second year. In between that step, we would have the opportunity to put the budget up again if it's defeated. That would be a decision the board would have to make, but ultimately, in the end, if it were defeated and defeated twice, we could have no increase at all in the amount of taxes that we raised to support the budget, which would be devastating. Here's the actual numbers that correspond to the formula. So we start with our current year tax levy for 2019-20. There's a tax-based growth factor that's calculated by the state. It's to reflect new construction within the school district. That's a positive increase for us, that 1.0041. It adds, if you can see to the right, the fact that we have some growth within our school community in terms of building. That adds $300,000 to the tax levy limit calculation for us. The next step in this process is we add pilots or payment in lieu of taxes. We only have one, but it's $259,280 that gets added to the formula. Then we subtract out what are termed capital expenditures net of state aid. So these are expenditures on buses. When we buy new buses, that's a capital expense. Also, when we do school construction, that is also a capital expense. So we have those expenses for debt. We also get aid back, state aid. So we have to calculate what are the expenditures, what are we receiving in aid, the net amount of that. That gets subtracted from the formula. And the idea here is what we're working toward is what gets incremented by the CPI, Consumer Price Index. Capital expenditures are not part of that limitation of a 2% increase, so they're backed out of the formula. So then we have our adjusted prior year tax levy. Now we get to add in our allowable levy growth factor. A maximum of 2%, no more than 2%, or less if the CPI happens to be less. For next year, it is going to be less. It's going to be 1.81%, so our expenses are capped at growth of 1.81%, and it's not the 2% maximum that it could be. That gets us to our growth adjusted tax levy subtotal. At this point, overall in the calculation, that adds $1.3 million. We get to subtract out pilots in the following year, payment in lieu of taxes, that's $74,000. The difference between the 259 above and the 74,000 is 184,000. We benefit from that. We're subtracting less than what we had before. That gets us to what's called our tax levy limit under the calculation. And then we get to add back those capital expenditures for the following school year. So again, they're outside of that 2% limit, so we took them out, we did the formula. Now we're going to put in those capital expenditures back in for the following year. That's a reduction overall of $151,000. That gets us down to our maximum allowable tax levy limit amount, $74,982,490, increase of $1,643 and 2.24%. So that's what we're working with at this point. There could be some changes in this formula going forward, tweaking it a little bit as more information becomes available. But right now, that's our starting point for the maximum amount of taxes we can raise. So kind of to summarize where we are in the budget process right now is we look at revenues and expenses. We have an executive budget state aid change that's expected to be a reduction of $413,000 when we compare our current budget for state aid and what we would need to include for next year. We have a maximum allowable tax levy growth of just over $1.6 million. That means the maximum amount of expenditure growth we have within the budget right now, $1,229,745. There's a lot to digest. Are there any questions on the board?
A few meetings ago, you presented on the rollover budget, and you noted that we were going to face a shortfall. Could you put those two pieces together to give us a better picture of what we're going into next year?
Well, we're a long way from the final budget, so there's a lot of data that we're still working with in terms of developing the budget. So the rollover was a broad estimate. Now we're in the process of actually looking at real data and trying to make those determinations. So we're projecting salaries, we're getting benefit information, we've got our debt, we've got other forms of revenue that we need to look at. I would not want to get ahead of ourselves, so we do a broad estimate of the rollover budget. Now we have additional information on the state aid side. This is a data point for us as we work toward developing a budget. We have a lot of factors to put on the expenditure side, so I don't want to give too much information about what we see the outcome is until we put all of those factors in terms of real dollars together along with the revenue piece.
Okay, but you also presented on the rollover budget already.
Pardon?
You've presented on the rollover budget already, so, I mean,
Well,
I don't understand.
We're still in a difficult situation.
Okay. Good enough.
We know that for sure. We're going to have to work through the process. There's a lot of pieces, though, that come together. So, again, we're using some very broad metrics on the rollover budget in terms of what cost estimates might be. Now we're in the detail work of saying exactly what do we expect to spend, and we have some choices within that process. So we're going to be seeing how all of those things shake out when we put more real data together. Any other questions? Ben?
Seema.
Oh, Ben, sorry.
So, not directly on state aid, but the governor's proposals for different tiers for reimbursement for capital expenditures and things like that. Did Gilling get caught in that net? Are we going to have to think about that going down the road? Are we going to get less reimbursement than our current 56% or whatever?
If this proposal goes through, and again, these are all proposals still subject to approval by the entire legislature by April 1st. If that were to go forward, any future capital project that we would engage in would be subject, assuming it passes, would be subject to some sort of reduced reimbursement. What that will be, I don't know. There isn't a clear proposal other than to say the minimum for the state is currently at 10%, so very wealthy school districts. We are not in this boat. The least amount of state aid you can get for a capital project is a 10% reimbursement. He said, well, we're going to make that 5%, but there's no other scaling, so I don't know if it's fair to say it's 5% from what it currently is, or it could be a different number. That's the only mention of the minimum threshold being reduced by 5% at this point.
Gloria?
Neil, could you go back one slide, please? In that one, how much could that go either way? What are the things in there that are in flux?
Really, at this point, there's a BOCES capital expense piece that was added as part of his proposal. So just like we do in the school district, BOCES, area BOCES will construct facilities and borrow for that. Those costs are passed on to the component school district, so we all pay share in that expense. That's never been part of the capital exclusion. So in the school district, we have the capital exclusion available to us for construction work that we do. We've never had the benefit of having that excluded from the 2% or CPI cap component. It's been embedded in whatever that amount is that we've been carrying forward. This time, surprisingly to everybody, because it's been on the table before, it was included, but we have no numbers for that yet. So what that distribution would look like is all schools within a component region that would be impacted in some way in terms of the formula. depending on the prorated share, could change this. And it would also go back in the base year. So 2019-20, we'd have to come up, there would be a number that we would have as a district for that piece. We would have the number for next year. So it's really the difference between those two numbers. Don't have a belief that it would be substantive between those two numbers, assuming, I don't know exactly, but not aware of any big difference that might occur between those two, but it might not be exactly these numbers at the end of the day.
Do we have any idea when those numbers are going to come down?
Everybody's doing the scramble.
Yeah.
So this gets released on January 21st. Information is very slow. I just saw a first webinar today from one of the organizations that tries to comb through the data and assist school districts with trying to understand the data. So it's taken about a week for those groups to try to get information. This information comes out, the first day it comes out from the governor, there is no information at the school level. And then it's a matter of that working through the legislative process, us finally getting some data, and then trying to understand how the budget was built as well and what that would mean for us as a school district. So there's still a fair amount of work that has to be done to parse all of that out and how it might affect the school district, each individual school district. We think we've got a pretty good handle at this point, but that piece is one piece that still there's no numbers yet that have been provided.
Internally, what stage are we at now? Are we stage 2 right now? Or are we?
We've met with all the building administrators. We have an understanding of the needs of the building, what they're requesting for next year, all district administrators, maintenance, facilities, transportation, and so on. We've had all of those budget conversations. We have a list of requests and needs. We've also been looking at where do we have savings. We're also we're going to have additional expenditures. Like I said, we're doing a lot of work at the district office level and just analyzing our expenses. So making sure we have all of the staffing down, everybody's position, salary, so we have number of employees, we have all of the pay data. Still need to look at benefits, driven off of salaries. So we need to make sure we have all of the salaries correct and the benefits start to fall into place. But in the meantime, we're looking at equipment, materials, supplies, utilities, fuel for the buses, debt, and all the revenue sources as well. So it's a deep dive into the details of what we're currently spending and what we're projected to spend next year based on the data that we have available to us. We still are awaiting BOCES programs and services, waiting costs for those. They all have to be analyzed. We're looking at special education placements in district, out of district, getting those students identified, getting the projected costs for those students, where will they be placed next year. So it's just a lot of data, and I give credit to the administrative staff that I have the pleasure of working with. It's a lot of difficult, time-consuming work. Our staff does a great job in providing me with the information that we need to put together the budget, and it's not easy work, and they do a great job. Any other questions?
Okay, thank you, Neil.
All right, thank you.
Next on the agenda, the consent items. We need a motion to approve the minutes from the January 14th, 2020 Board of Ed meetings, CPSE and CSE recommendations, personnel action, textbooks, and financials. Can I have a motion? Barb? Second, Gloria? Any questions? Ben?
My question is really just confirmation from Neil. I'm looking at the projected fund balance sheet, and we're going to have a surplus in revenue, in expenditures, and a surplus in revenues, but our change in total fund balance is going down. That's because of the money we appropriate. The money we appropriated this year, the money we plan on appropriating next year, for just keeping the budget running.
This is for this year. So right now, we're looking ahead a little bit of expenditures, looking at some areas where we're tight on, being conservative on that as well. So we've got our eyes on a few things, particularly in the benefit areas, just making sure those numbers, it's early on in the process. we're really, from an expenditure point of view, just over halfway through the school year. So, again, John Rizzo, who's our business administrator, is tracking expenditures, revenues compared to budget. Where do we think we're going to land? Again, we have our eyes on a few places that we think are tight at this point. Next few months are going to tell a lot, but we are looking ahead at that.
Other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passes 7-0. Next, information items. Dr. Singleton?
Thank you, Seema. My first item, I have a trade book review form for your information. The title of the book is How to Have Impossible Conversations, a very practical guide by Peter Bogosian and James Lindsay, and this is for use in the 12th grade elective Civil Conversations course. And my second item, I have attached for your information a recently published article written by Guilderland High School English teacher Alicia Wine. Her article, Measuring Loss, Physical Safety, and Psychic Cost, in the ELA Classroom, can be found in the latest edition of the peer-reviewed journal, The English Record, and this is in the winter 2020 edition. Her work centers on the challenges and experiences of trying to support our students during a time of heightened school safety in our modern age. It is a candid exploration that centers on how we as teachers grapple with concerns of school safety among our many roles and its impact on our classroom space, redefining what we understand to be a safe space. And we certainly want to congratulate Alicia for this publication and her fine work at Guilderland High School. And last item from Farnsworth Middle School, we want to recognize our library program. Each month, the Capital Region BOCES School Library System publishes the newsletter entitled The Inquirer. For the month of January, Guilderland's Farnsworth Middle School was recognized and showcased, and the newsletter is attached for your information. We do want to congratulate Maura Nichols and Lisa Lehman, who run the library at Farnsworth Middle School.
Sounds like she's training your next help desk.
Yeah. It's already up and running.
She's on here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Damien. Next, Superintendent Information, Dr.
Wait.
Wiles. Oh, I'm sorry, Barb.
The question.
Sorry.
Alicia mentioned, and I don't know if it was out of her own pocket, that she bought the kitty litter and the buckets and things. The school district doesn't supply any of that for schools, or?
It depends on if it's requested or not. So, in this case, there was no request for it.
But we would supply that stuff if?
We would certainly consider it. I mean, it depends on what the request is and what the context and the focus is, and if it's supporting our school program, sure.
The only reason I asked that, there was that big thing over in Exclusion a year or so ago, and that was a real problem, that, they needed buckets, they didn't have buckets, so, and they had no access, so I think they've gone to supplying those things in the classrooms. Now, I don't know if that's, every classroom or how it works, but I would.
Had them in place for years here,
Yeah.
so I don't know what the situation is in this scheme.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, next, Superintendent Information, Dr. Wiles.
Okay, thank you. My first item tonight is your first look at our school calendar for the 2020-2021 school year. You have the exhibit there before you. This draft has been looked at by lots of different people to provide their input to make sure we're not overlooking anything. But you'll see that we have a Labor Day, which is as late as Labor Day can be, on September 7th. So we're proposing bringing our faculty back on Wednesday, September 2nd and 3rd for our two superintendent conference days, and then starting with our students on September 8th. And then you can see how the rest of the year unfolds. It's a relatively straightforward calendar. All in all, we have 185 days in the calendar. So tonight, this is for your information. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, it'll come back before you at our February 11th board meeting for your approval and adoption, so we can get this out to our community, because this is a hot commodity. People are very interested in our calendar.
And going from a very long Christmas to
Wow.
much more compact.
The 2 weeks only happens once every 7 years.
When it's on Wednesday, yeah. But then looking at this one, it does look a lot shorter.
It's a bit shorter, yes.
However, that makes it easier to get in your 185 days if you don't start until September, or Labor Day isn't until September 7th.
Things fell into place
Yeah,
pretty
really
well
nice.
for us. Are there any questions on this initially? All right, thank you. My second item is a reminder. On this coming Thursday evening, January 30th, we're going to be participating in a forum on sustainability of schools at East Greenbush Central School District. The focus is on declining state aid for average wealth upstate school districts. I think Anil's presentation captured our plight pretty sadly, but accurately. The purpose of this is really to help our local elected officials understand that while we may not be in crisis right now, long-term, our sustainability as an average wealth district really is called into question. The aid we receive each year is far less than CPI, and eventually we're going to have a real problem in school districts like us of average wealth. So there are 10 area school districts who are participating. I'm hopeful that we will have an outstanding showing from the Guilderland Central School District. I know our Assembly member, Pat Fahey, will be there. And the point is to kind of highlight the issue, provide some ideas for solutions on how our elected officials can help us without necessarily just asking for more money, and also an opportunity to ask questions of our elected officials. So it starts at 7 o'clock. It'll wrap up by 8:30. And hopefully we won't need it, but there is a snow date for Thursday, February 6th. But I hope a lot of people can come. It's very important work. And that's all I have, unless there are questions.
No?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, board president information. We have one policy item, the homeschooling info. I don't know if anybody in policy wants to speak about that, Barb?
We had brought this before the board, I think maybe 2 meetings ago, and we met since then. And what you see here is sort of a meeting of the minds. We really, as Sean said, don't want to exclude any child that's in the district if at all possible. And so what we're doing here is saying that if there's room for a child to participate in an activity, and, you know, the teacher basically would control that, then we welcome them.
Questions? Barb, the full committee wasn't there, right, when you guys came up with the proposed plan for this, or was it just 2 people?
Yeah,
Okay.
that was the committee, the meeting. It was, I think Ben and you, Barbara, were there.
I was in there. Who else is on the committee?
Sean and Kelly.
The change here is participation in musicals, drama, and music groups.
Right. I remember we had a little bit of conversation, I
Yes.
think.
And I think I was
Kelly,
on,
if you had some input, if you wanted to, I'm sure that's.
I don't have any at the
Yeah,
moment.
yeah.
well, I think I
have
was on
time on this.
policy in the past when this discussion had come up before. And I know it was a kind of a lengthy discussion in policy, so I just didn't want to rush anything if there were only 2 people present. So it'd be good to look it over and come up with some questions.
This is just for a first read.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, our previous policy discussions were around a sentence that we decided to just take out, is really the change here. The other changes were required with the, changes in vaccination laws in New York State, and that's why we were looking at this policy. So again, we really just took out that sentence that carved out school plays and dramas and stuff.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Should I ask a question?
Oh, go ahead, Rebecca.
Is there a requirement for a medical exam like there is for enrollment in school, or just proof of vaccination?
Proof of vaccination or an exemption.
But no proof of a physical exam, so a physical exam from a doctor?
Not in the policy.
Other questions? All right, next action items. First, school business management action. Neil?
Thank you, Sima. First item this evening is the recommendation to approve a change order for the high school radon mitigation project. Change order number 19-01 to John W. Danforth, reducing the contract amount by $5,200 due to value engineering several components of the project.
Can I have a motion to approve the change orders for the radon mitigation? Ben, second. Rebecca? Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passes 7-0.
Next is the tax tertiary cost sharing agreement. We are working with the town of Guilderland in defense of several assessment challenges on commercial nature. So the town and the school district have agreed to engage designated experts. So we have a list of expert appraisers we would like you to approve, as well as expert accountants. I will read the list for you. In terms of appraisers, it's Hafner Valuation, Empire State Appraisal Consultants, Robinson Appraisal Group, Francis Appraisal, and Integrated Valuation. For the expert accountants, it's FAZ Forensics and BST Accounting. And then we've listed the commercial entities that were engaged in defending the assessment challenges. These will be pre-approved and utilized as needed depending on how the matters proceed. So we would be sharing the cost of those. The district would be paying 70% of the cost. The town of Guilderland would be paying 30% of the cost whenever these experts are engaged in this work.
Can I have a motion to approve the cost-sharing agreement? Judy, second. Kelly, any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passes 7-0.
Next is the establishment of non-resident tuition rates for the 2019-20 school year. We're over halfway through the school year, but the rates just came out from the State Education Department, and they calculate those. So we're recommending approval of the rates as follows. Grades K through 6, tuition cost of $11,631. For grades 7 through 12, it's $12,849. We currently have 2 non-resident students attending at the secondary level, so as a result of these rates, the district will get revenue of $25,698 for those 2 students.
Can I have a motion to approve the tuition rates? Barb, second. Ben, any questions?
You know, if these come from the state, why are we voting on them?
They still have to be approved. They're calculated by the state.
So we could change them?
I don't know if there's a methodology, so I don't know how much leeway we would have in there, but there's well, there is actually in law, there is a methodology for the calculation. So schools used to do this on their own. The state took this over based on, data that it's now able to collect from school districts and actually performed the calculation. I will tell you, it's a convoluted calculation. If you look at all of the entries, it's attendance and other factors. It's about 5 pages of line by line, different factors, and ultimately results in what are the charges. So we're happy not to have to do that, but it does take them this long to get the data to calculate the factors for the current school year. So the parents have been paying estimated tuition up to this point. Now that we have the final rates, we'll go back and adjust the rates going forward so we collect the appropriate amount of money over the course of the school year.
Barb?
How many, elementary, middle school, and high school do we have
We
that are
have
paying
2
tuition?
at the secondary level, 1 at the middle school and 1 at the high school this year. That's it.
Do that one more time. 2 elementary? No.
No elementary, 1 middle school, 1 high school.
1 middle school, 1 high school.
Some years we don't have any, some years never had a large number of students, but.
Other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passes 7-0.
And then finally this evening, I'm pleased to announce that we've received a couple of donations. First is Physical Therapy Total Training System from Mrs. Terry Maxwell, who's an employee of the district, and also a monetary donation from the High School National Honor Society for the purchase of updated furnishings for the Student Center.
Can I have a motion to approve the donations? Kelly, second. Judy, any questions or comments besides?
What a great
Thank
thing
you.
for the Honor Society.
Ben, do you have a question?
What is the Student Center?
Mike here. Mike.
Mike
Piscatelli.
Mike, what's the Student
What's the Student Center?
Where?
The Honor Society.
Okay, it's just a room that's manned by National Honor Society students to provide tutoring services. It's right in room 600, right off the front entrance. Is that what you're asking?
Thank you.
Neil, could you repeat what he just said?
It's a room right off the front entrance.
600 wing.
600 wing.
Where tutoring happens.
Amy was paying better attention than I was.
I did.
It's manned by the National Honor Society, and they
Manned by
do
Honor
tutoring.
Society, right.
Okay.
Honor Society's room.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passes 7-0. Thank you for the donations. Next, board president action. We have 3 policy adoptions here. Does anybody on the policy committee want to, or can I have a motion first to approve these? Judy, second. Rebecca, any questions or comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passes 7-0. Next, board committee reports. I'll start with policy.
Oh, we had our meeting, you see the benefit of our work, and we potentially have a meeting set up for, what is it, Friday,
I think we're doing a doodle.
we're gonna do a doodle now?
Yes, and I've left you our minutes from our last meeting.
Okay.
Next, business practices.
We met on January 22nd at 4 o'clock. We discussed buses, and Danielle did that presentation. We were joined by veterans who would like higher exemptions. We are among the higher exemptions at this point, but we will be asking the district to explore ways to bring this to the community and see what the community feels about this. And there will not be anything this year. That'll be next year by March 1st. We discussed the turf fields again and the cost. And Cliff, we are looking at it for not this year, but the next year's budget as a referendum. And Cliff said that if we're going to continue the turf field, we should also revisit the items that we had to take out of our last referendum in order to get it passed, because those things were also vitally important. And we need improved radio communication for emergency responders and improved pedestrian access to Gildan Elementary, because the state is planning a crosswalk so that people from the apartments could get there, but then we would need more sidewalks, and that's a tough place to go.
There's a crosswalk there, right, already?
Well, that's, I think, coming up from the apartments, I think. Is that right, Cliff? Yeah. We knew we'd get to you for something.
The town applied for a sidewalk grant, so they're actually going to do sidewalks on the Y side, YMCA side,
On
from
Western.
the apartments all the way up to the library. And yes, I do believe they already painted a crosswalk there. So one of the concerns was, if we were going to talk about capital projects, that is something we need to look at, because I do think we would get walkers from the apartments. We have no place to put them on our side of the street to walk them in safely.
I mean, my kids are GS. I've had to park and I've had to use a crosswalk before, so I know that there's no more place to park over there. So that would be great if they had.
No more place to park it, and then you need the
Then you gotta walk
sidewalk for
in.
when you're walking
Yeah,
into
there's no
the
sidewalk.
school
Can't walk
from
with
the
your car.
crosswalk.
Yeah, no.
It's dangerous.
Yeah, because all those cars are going in and out and on Route 20.
Accident there, you know,
Uh,
last year.
And we have not set a time. Cliff will also have to work with the architects and construction managers, which would be a cost in this year's budget in order to get it ready for the referendum.
Cliff, since you're still standing, can I just ask a question?
Last man standing.
Where does it track, I forgot, where does the track fall into, like, if they were, like, business practices talking about, you know, the turf field for probably, maybe the next year, like, how would that work with fixing the track?
Track, if we were, quick history, our project is 3 years, 2020, 2021, 2022. So we're focusing on safety and security this first summer, and then we're still working on the phasing for 2021 and 2022. Yeah, this gets fun. Hang on. So if we were to consider the turf field, I would put off the track work to 2022, the last of 3 summers of
Okay.
the project. So if we were to truly do this, we would start relatively soon to work on a proposition to put up in 2021, not this summer, following summer, expedited review for SED to be able to start and do work in 2022, which would be the last year of our capital project. My conversation with the Business Practice Committee was not opposed to doing that. There were things we cut, playgrounds, as Mrs. Blaziak brought up, that would be worth looking at, and possibly putting up a smaller prop, not just a prop for a turf field. Then there's also money associated with the track that's in the project, about $460,000. So depending on what that work for the turf complex would look like, that would fold into that number as well. The only thing I will respectfully ask the board, if we do want to go that direction, one, we would need the budget for it. There's a cost for professional services to do the pre-ref and to put our prop up. And we would kind of have to pick a direction relatively soon to be able to do that. We're working on $30.9 million worth of work now. More than happy to go and look at it with the community, but it's still a lot of work to go out, look at that, what we'd want to do and what we would want to present.
Are we just talking one turf field in the football area and
Yes, ma'am.
not in the lacrosse area?
No. We're not. I presented 3 options to the Business Practice Committee. One was working within our existing track area now. There are potential drainage concerns there. If the existing drainage can handle a turf field, and that's key to having a turf field, is be able to take the water off of it. Second option was expanding our track out, making that a little larger. That would take care of the drainage issue. It would also give us the opportunity to put in a bigger field. We would be able to cover soccer. Snyder, we kind of took off the table, Bart, because we have no infrastructure up there. When you talk about lighting, bathrooms, electrical, it doesn't exist. So the cost to put, if you just wanted to put a field up there and have no lights, we rent porta potties in the spring and fall already for bathroom use. The cost would be 2 to 3 times if you wanted to truly put a complex, bleachers, bathrooms, lighting, to be able to put a field on Snyder.
So are we talking about the section option with a little larger field and the track moved out a little?
I'm not talking about any particular option just yet. It depends what direction we want to go. I would want to dig deeper. We'd work with our athletic department to see what the needs are. You can play up to 5 sports on a turf field. We can paint a turf field to play 5 sports. I would know soccer would definitely like the field larger than what it is now. So I will be honest, I do have Turner Construction, our construction management firm, running numbers on option 2. Just so we.
So we have the room to do option 2. That sounds, I mean, to me as an outsider, the best of the worst options. Totally.
Well, and I would be honest, we could be forced into option 2, depending on drainage. But once again, I've spent a tremendous amount of time on this, but as I told Business Practice, we haven't spent any money with engineering. The information I've gotten from our architects and engineers. They've worked on these similar projects in neighboring school districts. So for us, before we could make a decision between 1 and 2, we would have to dig in deeper to what infrastructure is out there now.
Totally unrelated. The Gilliland Elementary School, know that plot of land that we bought many years ago? Is there any way that that could be leveled and make more parking up there, or use some of that land for parking? Parking is such a premium over there.
Parking can be a premium everywhere.
Yeah, but we have the land there to do something with.
we can do whatever this community would like to spend money on. Honest answer, sure. I could put parking in. I mean, we've had issues with looking at putting a second egress road out of Farnsworth, and it ultimately comes down to how much money do we want to spend? So we could. It would be costly. You know, and it's the same thing when I look at, I would be right now, I'm more concerned about if we have sidewalks, getting kids in safely, not walking up our driveway. But that's just my opinion. It's all money.
You do anything.
Other questions for Cliff? Thanks, Cliff. Anything else from business
No,
practices?
that was it. We don't have another meeting scheduled yet.
Okay. Next, audit?
Sean and
Oh,
me.
okay. So I guess we'll get an update maybe next time. Is anybody on the audit committee?
Me.
Oh, just you.
Yeah. I have no update. We
Okay.
just have a meeting in a couple days.
Yeah, okay, so you have a
Well,
meeting
we just had
scheduled.
to cancel that one. I don't know if you got that
Okay.
information or not. So we're looking to reschedule a meeting that we originally had scheduled for
Okay,
Thursday. But this might be an opportunity too, that we have multiple openings on the committee for board members. So if anybody would like to participate on the audit committee.
are there normally 3 on there?
Normally
Yes.
3.
Okay.
Rebecca's standing alone
Senior
at this
member.
point.
Oh, senior member. It's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
All right, so there'll be a rescheduled meeting for audit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. And last, communications?
I was not present at our last meeting,
Yeah,
so.
I'm trying to locate the, I don't have the minutes, but I do have the. You have
I've got
them?
it.
You are so good. Couldn't get to them quick enough. Yes, we did meet, then there. Oh, gotta use the thing. I'm not used to this.
Yeah.
That's right.
You're too high-tech
Oh,
for
my
it.
God, how am I doing this? Okay, there we go.
It's like we're back in 2014.
This is old school. What am I doing with this?
There you go.
Okay, we discussed, the first item on the agenda was the opt-out policy review of a new form. The committee reviewed the draft of the opt-out notification forms prepared by the communication office. The committee preferred the first sample. We were given some samples, so we gave our input. We preferred the first sample, but we wished to include, there was a phrase on the second, the way it was worded was much better on the second form, so we cut and pasted and moved that over, and we wanted to be very clear, we wanted that statement to be very clear that the district is only responsible for what's posted on the district public relations channels. The amended form made that very clear. And you agreed to bring the revised copy to the communications committee at our next meeting for an expanded look at and a final approval before bringing it to the whole board. We talked a little bit about the new math program. We asked Damien to just give us an update. He reminded us of some of the things that had been planned in the district for parents, that there was a parent information night. The committee also discussed public comment. There was a public comment from a parent about the professional development and the time out of class for teachers and things like that. So Damien said he was unaware of any professional development events that would take a particular teacher from that school, but he did look into that. And he was going to go ahead, and I think you agreed to just get some more information for us and encourage the parent. And we always encourage parents to always start with the people at the site, at their class. Start with the classroom teacher, talk with that person first, which may then move to the next level, which might be the building principal or the math specialist in this case. So it'll kind of work your way up. You might get your answer a lot quicker than jumping right to the district office, because the people right there would have the answer for you. So we just encourage parents to start there. We also talked about our thought exchange follow-up. As a follow-up to the high school thought exchange, which was completed in the fall. The district's newsletter, I mean, you might want to talk about this, the newsletter, and how it's going to focus on some of the issues that were defined.
So we're getting ready to go to print on the district newsletter, and we framed it around seeking input from our students and what was on their mind, and weeding it in with our interest in sharing with the broader community kind of where we are with our capital construction projects. So It talks about what we heard from students and then how we've addressed some of those concerns with work that's already been done and then work that's being planned. We're also doing a little bit in there about the work deferred from the capital projects, so we frame that issue as well. And then we're also doing a story about school start time in the newsletter.
About?
School start times.
Right. That was good, you covered our sixth item.
Oh, there you go.
We talked a lot about the capital project and how we use that newsletter to talk about what's been deferred. That was an important piece, because we have to keep that in mind, because we keep coming up with other ideas, but we have to remember there's a lot of things that we said needed to get done that we couldn't do, and we have to go back to that list and keep ourselves aware of that. And then the other thing is, Marie reminded us of the sustainability program that's going to come up in East Greenbush this week. And we did not set a new meeting. I think we were going to do a doodle.
Yes.
Yeah. From Linda.
Or Deb, one of the two.
Oh, yeah, somebody. Thank you.
So is the opt-out form that's changed when you said it's going to clarify that anything official from the district, does that mean like any social media things?
We have no
official ones from the district?
From the district,
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
We have Twitter, Facebook, those kinds of things.
Okay.
Instagram. But
make
if
it
somebody
clear.
takes a pic, we can't have control of everybody's iPhones or phones or anything.
That's, I think, all of the subcommittees,
Um,
boards.
I just want to add something to
Sure.
the policy committee report. We've been discussing what steps might need to be involved in requiring a financial literacy class in the district. There's a policy that sets forth our graduation requirements that we've been looking at. So if anyone has any thoughts on that, they'd be appreciated as we go through this rather long process.
Just as a question, has anybody looked into the purpose of the, and I know the purpose of the finance literacy, but the effect, how effective they're, I only ask it because I was just reading an article saying that the effects seem to be seen among children who had difficult family, low-income kids who were having difficulty, that didn't get these skills maybe at home and things, but not as effective with kids in the upper levels. So I was curious because I was reading this thing, oh, wow. I'm just curious if people have looked at who it's effective for. Does every kid need to take it, or is it something that we need to look at for a subgroup of kids who really don't get the maybe the home information, the help, that just raising the point, because it may be such a big thing we can't do that one, but we can do something.
Maria, could you share that article?
Sure.
Because I haven't seen that. That'd be very
Well,
interesting.
it's in a book that I'm reading now about kids growing up in families that are having economic difficulties, lots of other kind of difficulties, but I'll share you that with the information.
Right.
And I'm trying to find out where that information came from so I could trace it back.
The reason why we began looking at it, our school district has 23 graduation requirements, which is higher than all competing school districts. And we started looking at that, and then the financial literacy piece also sort of fits in, because, if you require another course, then some other courses will be affected, particularly your electives. And so Mike is doing a good job looking at, what would the impact be on the different groups from special ed to, the higher student. And, we'll just keep gathering information. So anything like that you see.
Yeah, because I just want to make sure if
I
we're
think-
making it if it's an elective, I have no problem with it, but if we're going to say every student's taking it, then I think we need to be very clear that it's something every student actually will benefit from.
One of the things that we have to find out is if this Hudson Valley class, can be taught by one of our teachers. Do we have to do the Hudson Valley class, or can we have a social studies teacher do it so that no social studies teachers lose their jobs? There's a lot of pieces that go into it. So again, it's being explored. I think everybody realizes it's a nationwide movement, that they know kids need something like this, and I haven't seen it differentiated that way. In the
That's why
past.
that
So-
caught my attention. that's
Exactly.
I mean, I see the benefits of it, and after the two, I think, business teachers presented to us early in the year about the class, I thought, it was even better, but to mandate it is a graduation requirement, I think knowing how scheduling happens at the high school, I wasn't, I'm not on policy, so I don't know what the impact would be, but I think it would be a lot, like a huge impact, and probably become way more complicated than necessary. Like, I think if students want to take it and maybe give the teachers more support in trying to recruit students to come to the class, like, I'm in favor of the class, but mandating it seems kind of extreme.
I think we should keep an open mind, because Mike's, I think, looking at the impact, so we need to just be aware of what's out and gather as much information as we can.
But we're also exploring ways to build in this kind of information into existing classes. Economics is a requirement, for example, already. So, like I said, we're exploring it. It's a process, and so any input that anyone has would be appreciated.
I like that idea. Thank you. Board sharing issues, ideas. Go ahead, Gloria.
Ben and I, we could piggyback off each other. We had the pleasure, and Marie was at one of the nights too. At this week, the high school was having a lot going on. So I know 3 of us were at the EMC squared. We've been not judges, evaluators. We give input. These kids are halfway through the year. There are 15 of them this year, and they're all identified the most fascinating topics. I would never be able to research, but from all different spans. And they come together halfway through the year, and they present to us and anyone else who comes, just to kind of share and get an idea of where they're at. And we give suggestions as to where they might go with it, or ask questions. And we had a great time. I mean, it's supposed to be, I think it was supposed to be 2 hours. We ended up there. Ben and I were leaving there at 9:15, I think. It was really fascinating. We got to give a lot of credit to these kids. The amount of effort they put in that independent study project is amazing to me. The other night, Ben and I were at the TEDx. I don't know how many of you listen to TED Talks. They are awesome. But apparently there's a way for high schools or any group to get a license to do a TED Talk. So this was the first that the two high school kids got together, and with the help of Dr. Singleton, whom they praised greatly for helping them out, they got a license and permission to do a TED Talk, GHS. And if you've never seen one, you got to go next year, because they have to do it again. It was so great. They had 4 speakers, or 5.
4.
They get up on stage and they talk their topic, and all they have is slides, and they have no notes. It just boggled my mind that these kids could go on and talk about their topic, from space to math to technology. It was all over the place. Storytelling, everything you could think of.
Does it change? Because I know in the past, before it was licensed, we had TED Talks here with the students, but how does it change when it's licensed?
We've never had an official TED Talk.
Oh, really?
No, this is the first
TEDx.
time.
Oh, okay.
TEDx.
TED-like talks.
Okay.
For
TED-like
TEDx.
talks. But they're pretty rigid on,
Okay.
being able to use the term TED
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
title.
Right.
But the 2 students who led it, I'll just praise them back.
Yeah,
Anish Mupidi and Aiden Doyle. They really took the lead. I mean, I coached them a little bit and helped them navigate the licensing and all of that, but I give all the credit to them, so.
Yeah, and those kids that put in the time to do that, because one of them actually was in the EMC squared night too, and then she came back the next night. She's performing again. I went, oh my gosh.
Her speech was about procrastination. And it's obvious why, because she had one presentation to give one night and another presentation the next night.
These kids are, I mean, you got to go to these things once in a while. It's like Judy when she says she goes, they just get you. Then you know why you're here. I mean, when you see some of the things these kids do.
I just had one comment, and then, well, I guess 2 comments. One, thank you to the board for coming, and DOT for coming to the mini retreat we had, I think, 2 weeks ago, maybe a week ago, I can't remember. That was very helpful to come together to talk about goals for the district. And then second, I would like if policy committee could look at the email that was sent about the volunteer forms at the schools, because I think the issues that were raised were good, and I think I was on policy when we first came up with that, but I think she had some really good points. So I don't know if, there could be any amendments, but I think it's worth a revisit.
Yeah,
I agree.
Will we be sharing the goals we came up with and doing more work around them?
I
with
actually
the
have them right
community?
here with me, but
I think they're going to be in the Friday update.
unless you want a copy on your way out.
But maybe we could also talk about it, put a little thing in the minutes for or the agenda next time.
Yeah, for next time.
Well, you know, I
Where we
guess,
came to consensus on some things that we really wanted to focus on.
right, I guess what I mean, are these set, or are we gonna, present them and see if people want to weigh in from the community and parents and stuff before we say, all right, for the next X number of years, these are the things we're focusing on? Because these are all things that are going to take many years to do.
Right.
I'm just wondering if,
Next step.
as I talked about visioning in the past, it was very important that we include all stakeholders, and so I'm just making sure that we're doing that, if we are doing something else.
I was thinking too that most of the things that we're already into. I mean, they're not foreign. We haven't pulled things out that the public won't know that we've been dealing with. But I think being attentive to how now we go to that next step, and as we move along in each of these areas, when do we bring people in? And to what extent, and how. Yeah, I think keeping that in mind is crucial.
And also setting up a time when to, evaluate the goals, and have we, met the goals? Are we on the way to reaching the goals, and how that impacts the budget? But yeah, I think that they would be next steps. So I think we'll get an update this Friday, and then.
So just so you know, when we left that meeting, I had 5 words on a piece of paper.
I know. I remember.
So I turned, and DOT critiqued my work, as they usually do. I turned those 5 words into 5 statements, and they're in draft form. So I'll share them out on Friday, and you can tell me, you can critique them further, but then I think they need to be turned into more of an action plan, with the goal at the top, and then what activities are we going to do, by when, who's doing it, and that kind of a thing. But
That's where we need to be, I think, sensitive to our goal of including all stakeholders.
Right.
So I'll look for your feedback, and we'll put it on the February 11th agenda.
Judy?
Just a quick reminder, I talked last time about the unified bowling, which will be February 11th, so it'll be before, in the afternoon. Regan said they have 40 kids who are taking part in it, which is just wonderful. And if you could go, 4:15 at Town and Country Lanes on the 11th, the 13th, and I think the 26th. But the 11th is before our next board meeting, and I encourage you to go if you want your heart to feel bigger and warmer and just love these kids a little bit more.
Barb?
Just a quick reminder that the Pops concert is coming up on the 1st, and that's always a fantastic night.
Any other sharing ideas? I think we need a motion to go back into executive session to discuss board member vacancies. We have a motion. Gloria, second. Kelly, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passes 7-0.
You didn't get Sean's email today? He's out next week. Getting a new job. Don't worry, I pretty much decided to stay until the end of my term.
It's back to Linda, right?
No, it just has a bunch of recurring conflicts with board meetings and stuff. You know how he struggles to get here even now?